I was 6 years old when my mother walked out. It was a Tuesday in October. The leaves were just starting to turn red and yellow, but she didn't wait to see them. She came into my room that morning while I was eating toast with peanut butter. She kissed me on the forehead, right where my hair parted. She said, "I'll be back before the leaves turn." Then she picked up her brown suitcase, the one with the broken handle she kept taped with duct tape, and walked out the front door. I didn't run after her. I didn't scream. I just stood there with my toast in my hand, watching the screen door swing shut behind her. I didn't cry because I had seen her do this before. Last year she left for 3 days to visit her sister. She came back with a new dress and a bottle of perfume. But this time, she didn't leave a note. She didn't call. She just left. My father didn't say anything when he saw her go. He was sitting in his chair by the stove, the same chair he sat in every night after work. He didn't look up. He didn't ask where she was going. He just reached for the whiskey bottle on the table, poured a glass, and drank it all in one swallow. Then he poured another. He didn't speak to me all day. He didn't ask if I was hungry. He didn't tell me to go play outside. He just sat there, staring at the wall like she had never lived in this house. I went to the window and watched the road. I watched for her car. I watched for her walking back with her suitcase. I watched until the lights started to fade. I stayed there until my feet hurt. I didn't cry. I knew crying wouldn't make her come back. For 3 days, I didn't leave the house. I didn't go to school. I didn't eat much. I slept on the floor next to the front window so I could see anyone who came down the road. I kept my shoes on, just in case she showed up and I had to run out. I ate crackers from the kitchen cabinet when I got hungry. I drank water from the tap. I didn't ask my father for anything. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He didn't come into my room. He didn't turn on the TV. He just sat in his chair, drinking whiskey, staring at the wall. The phone didn't ring. No one came by. The neighbors didn't knock. I knew then that no one was coming to check on us. No one cared. I didn't cry. I just sat there waiting until I realized she wasn't coming back. Not this time. Not ever. I stopped waiting on the 3rd day. It was raining. I had been watching the road since 6 in the morning. My socks were wet. My nose was running. I didn't wipe it. I just kept looking. A car passed. It wasn't hers. Another car passed. It wasn't hers. A truck with a red roof went by. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the cupboard. I took out a can of beans. I opened it with the can opener. I ate them cold, straight from the can. I didn't use a spoon. I didn't care. I walked back to the window. I sat down on the floor. I didn't look out anymore. I just stared at the wooden floorboards. I knew then that love didn't stay. It didn't wait. It didn't come back. If someone left, they were gone. I learned that day. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Crying doesn't bring people back. It just makes your eyes hurt. I never asked my father where she went. He never told me. I never asked if she called. He never said. I never asked if she was coming back. He never answered. I stopped asking questions. I started doing things. I made my bed every morning. I washed my own clothes. I fed the chickens. I swept the porch. I didn't wait for anyone to tell me what to do. I just did it. I didn't talk much. I didn't smile much. I didn't cry. I learned how to be quiet. I learned how to listen. I learned how to watch people's faces when they talked. I learned that if someone says they'll come back, they usually don't. I learned that if you want something to stay, you have to hold on tight. And if you're not strong enough to hold on, you learn to let go without making a sound. That's what I did. I let go. Quietly. Without a word. Without a tear. I still remember the smell of her perfume. It was cheap, like flowers and sugar. I used to sneak into her room when she wasn't home and smell her pillow. I kept one of her hair clips in my pocket for a long time. I didn't throw it away. I didn't hide it. I just carried it. I thought if I kept it, she might still be real. But after a year, I gave it to my teacher. I told her I didn't need it anymore. She didn't ask why. She just took it and put it in her desk. I never went back to that room. I never opened the closet. I never looked at her shoes. I didn't cry when I saw her name on the calendar. I didn't cry when I heard her old radio playing on the porch. I just turned it off. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need to remember. I learned that holding on doesn't make love stay. It just makes you heavier. And I was already heavy enough. I was 10 years old when I learned to recognize the belt before I heard my father coming down the hall. It wasn't the footsteps I feared. It was the sound of the leather sliding out of the loops on his jeans. A soft, dry scrape, like something being pulled from a drawer. I'd hear it in the kitchen after dinner when he was washing his hands. I'd freeze. I'd drop my fork. I'd know what was coming. He never yelled. He never said, "You're going to get it." He just walked into my room, closed the door and said, "Time to make a man of you." That's what he called it. Making a man of you. Like I was broken, and he was fixing me. I didn't fight. I didn't cry out. I learned to stand still, to pull my shirt down over my arms, to turn my back, to count the swings. 1, 2, 3. I knew when it was going to hurt the worst. When he pulled his arm back far, like he was throwing a ball. I'd brace my feet. I'd hold my breath. I didn't want him to think I was weak. I didn't want him to hit me harder. I wore long sleeves in July. I wore my brother's old sweaters to school, even when it was 90 degrees outside. I pulled my cuffs down past my wrists. I kept my arms folded when I sat at my desk. The nurse at school asked me every year, "Who did this?" pointing to the purple mark on my shoulder or the red line on my back. I said, "I fell." I said it so many times, I started believing it myself. I fell off the swing. I fell down the basement stairs. I fell running in the hallway. I never said his name. I never said, "My dad," because if I did, someone might ask why. And if they asked why, they might come to the house. And if they came to the house, he'd hit me more. I didn't want that. I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't want anyone to know I was scared. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak. So I lied. Every time. I lied until the bruises didn't even feel like mine anymore. They were just marks, like dirt on my skin, like something that would wash off. The belt stopped hurting as much after a while. Not because it got easier. Because I got used to it. I stopped flinching. I stopped counting. I just stood there. I let it happen. I told myself it was just one more thing I had to do, like brushing my teeth, like doing my homework, like eating the food he put on the table, even when it was cold. I learned to live inside my head while he was hitting me. I imagined I was somewhere else. I was in a classroom. I was reading a book. I was on a beach. I was anywhere but there. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't scream. I just stood there and let it go on. And after it was over, he'd walk out. He'd say, "Good. Now you know better." And I'd say, "Yes, sir." And I'd go take a bath. I'd scrub my skin until it turned red. I'd use the soap until the bottle was empty. I'd sit in the hot water until my fingers pruned. I'd try to wash the pain away, but it never came off. It stayed under my skin. It stayed in my bones. For a while, it worked. The belt came less often. He'd hit me once a week, then once a month, then only when I got a bad grade or forgot to take out the trash. I thought I had learned how to survive. I thought I had figured out the rules. I thought if I did everything right, if I stayed quiet, if I didn't make a sound, I could make it stop. But then one night, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't forget my chores. I didn't talk back. I just sat at the table eating my dinner. He came home late. He had been drinking. He didn't say a word. He just walked into my room, pulled the belt off, and started hitting me. Harder than ever. He hit me until the belt broke. He hit me until I fell to the floor. He hit me until I couldn't stand up. He didn't say anything. He just walked out. I lay there for an hour. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling. And I realized something. I didn't need to do anything right to stop it. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to be quiet. It didn't matter. He was going to hit me anyway, and I was going to have to live with it. Because no one was coming to help me. No one ever did. I didn't tell anyone. Not my teacher. Not my friends. Not my cousins. Not the pastor who came to our house once a year. I didn't tell anyone because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they'd believe me, and they'd do nothing. I saw what happened to the girl in my class who said her dad hit her. The school called her mom. The mom said it was just a spanking. The school dropped it. The girl stopped talking. She stopped raising her hand. She stopped smiling. I didn't want to be her. I didn't want to be invisible. I just wanted to be left alone. So I stayed quiet. I stayed small. I stayed in my room. I studied harder. I got straight A's. I cleaned the house. I did the laundry. I made sure I never gave him a reason. But I learned that night, after the belt broke, that there was no reason good enough. He didn't need one. He just needed to be angry. And I was just there. I was the thing he could hit. I was the thing he could break. And I knew then, for the first time, that I would have to get out. Not tomorrow, not next year, but soon. Because if I stayed, I'd become what he wanted me to be. Nothing. I didn't cry that night. I didn't cry the next day. I didn't cry when I went to school with a swollen back and a bruise on my hip. I didn't cry when the nurse asked me again, "Who did this?" I just said, "I fell," and I walked out. I kept walking. I walked to the bus stop. I walked to my desk. I walked through every day like I was carrying something heavy inside me, and I didn't put it down. I didn't talk about it. I didn't let anyone see it, but I carried it. Every day, every night, every time I heard his footsteps. I carried it because I didn't know how to let it go, and I didn't know if I ever would. But I knew this. I was not going to stay here forever. I was going to leave. And when I did, I was never going to let anyone make me feel small again. Not even him. Not even if he was my father. I was 8 years old when I met Lillian. It was a Tuesday after school, and I had run away from home because my father had hit me again for spilling milk. I didn't cry. I just walked out the back door and kept going until I got to the woods behind the church. I knew that place because I used to sneak there to read books I stole from the school library. That day, I found a girl sitting on a tree stump, barefoot, wearing a dress that was too big and covered in dirt. Her hair was tangled, and her toes were black with mud. She didn't look scared. She didn't look like she cared that I was there. "You're the quiet one," she said, "the one who sits alone at lunch." I didn't answer. I just sat down on the ground a few feet away. She didn't ask me why I was crying. She just handed me a piece of hard candy wrapped in wax paper. "It's peppermint," she said. "It makes your throat feel better." I ate it. It was the first thing someone gave me that didn't come with a price. We started meeting every day after school. She didn't go to school. She said her grandma didn't like the noise, so she stayed in the woods. She showed me where the hollows in the big oak trees were, and she said fairies lived inside them. She said the fairies were small, with wings made of spider silk, and they only came out when the moon was full. She told me they fixed broken things, broken toys, broken hearts, broken promises. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to. For the first time, I wanted to believe in something that didn't hurt me. We traded secrets like we traded candy. She told me her mom died in the hospital screaming because the doctors didn't listen. I told her my father called me a mistake every time he drank. She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "Mine died because she was tired of being scared." We made a promise. When we turned 12, we would leave. We'd walk to the next town, find a bus, and never come back. We'd find a place where no one knew our names. We'd find a house with a lock on the door that only we had the key to. I wrote it down in pencil on a piece of notebook paper. She drew a picture of the house with 2 windows and a garden. We buried it under a rock near the creek. One October, the leaves turned red and orange, and Lillian didn't show up. I waited for her every day after school. I brought her candy. I brought her a red scarf I found in the trash. I left it on the tree stump. She didn't come. I waited for a week, then 2. I asked around at school. No one knew where she was. I asked her grandma. The old woman just looked at me like I was stupid. "She ran off with a drifter," she said. "She was always wild." I didn't believe her. I went to the creek by myself. I looked for her boots. I looked for her footprints. I found them. Near the edge of the water, where the dirt was soft, I saw 2 sets of prints. One small, barefoot, the other big, with deep lines from heavy soles. I recognized those boots. They were the same ones my father wore when he came home late from work. The ones he left by the back door, smelling like beer and sweat. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my teacher when she asked why I was so quiet. I didn't tell anyone because I was scared. Scared that if I said something, my father would come after me next. I didn't cry. I just stopped going to the woods. I stopped eating candy. I stopped believing in fairies. I thought about Lillian every day. I remembered the way she laughed when she told me about the fairies. I remembered how she held my hand when we walked through the tall grass. I remembered the way she looked at me like I wasn't broken. I kept the piece of paper with our plan. I kept the drawing of the house. I hid them under my mattress. I touched them every night before I went to sleep. I whispered her name. I whispered, "I'm still here." I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I didn't know if she was still waiting for me. I didn't know if she ever thought about me. But I never forgot her face. Not the dirt on her cheeks, not the way her eyes looked when she talked about the fairies, not the way her feet looked in the snow. I saw her face every time I closed my eyes, every time my father raised his hand, every time I heard a child laugh at school, every time I heard someone say, "She's just a quiet one." I saw her, and I knew. She was the only person who ever looked at me like I mattered. And I never told anyone what I saw near the creek, because if I had, I would have had to say his name, and I was too scared to say it out loud. I turned 12 the year after she disappeared. On my birthday, I didn't get a cake. I didn't get a card. I didn't get a hug. My father was at the bar. My mother was gone. I walked to the woods by myself. I didn't bring candy. I didn't bring the scarf. I brought a rock. I found the same tree stump. I put the rock on top of the spot where we buried our plan. I knelt down and whispered, "I'm here, Lillian." I didn't say anything else. I didn't cry. I just sat there until the sun went down. I didn't go home until it was dark. I didn't go back to the woods after that. But I kept the paper. I kept the drawing. I kept her face in my mind. I never told anyone about her. Not my teacher, not my friends, not even when they asked why I never played with anyone. I just said, "I like being alone." And I believed it. Because if I told the truth, I would have to admit that I lost the only person who ever saw me as more than a mistake. And I wasn't ready to carry that weight alone. I am 16 now. I still think about her. I still wake up sometimes and think I hear her voice calling me from the trees. I still look at barefoot girls on the bus and wonder if it's her. I still check the creek every time I pass it. I never told anyone what I saw. I never told anyone about the boots. I never told anyone that I think my father took her. I don't know if I'm right, but I know what I saw. And I know that silence is the heaviest thing a person can carry. I carry it every day. I carry it when I walk past the church. I carry it when I see a tree with a hollow. I carry it when I find a piece of candy on the sidewalk and pick it up, just in case. I never forgot her face, not for a second. And I never will. Even if no one else remembers her, I do. And that's enough. For now, it's enough. I was 17 when I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't the boy I loved. His name was Tommy, and he used to walk me home from school, hold my hand under the table at the diner, and tell me he'd marry me one day. But it wasn't him. It was Pastor Evans's son, Jake. He was older, 17 too, but he drove a truck and had a leather jacket. He kissed me behind the barn one night after church youth group, said he liked how quiet I was, said I wasn't like the other girls who talked too much. He promised he'd take care of me, said we'd get married after graduation. I believed him. I was stupid. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to ask for help. I just kept thinking, if I just waited, things would work out. I missed my period. Then I threw up every morning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell Tommy. I was scared. I went to the drugstore and bought a test. I did it in the bathroom at school, hiding in a stall, my hands shaking so bad I dropped it. The stick turned pink. I sat on the floor for 20 minutes, just staring at it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked back to class and sat down. I didn't tell my teacher I felt sick. I didn't tell anyone. I started wearing my dad's old flannel shirts over my clothes. I stopped eating lunch. I didn't want to get fat. I didn't want anyone to see. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would go away. But it didn't. My stomach got bigger. My jeans got tight. I started limping because my hips hurt. I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. One night after dinner, my dad called me into the kitchen. He was sitting at the table drinking beer. He didn't look at me. He just slid a pair of scissors across the table. They were old, the kind my mom used to sew curtains with. The handles were worn smooth. "Fix it yourself," he said. I didn't move. I said, "Fix it." I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I just stared at the scissors. He didn't yell. He didn't hit me. He just sat there waiting. I knew if I said no, he'd do it himself. Or worse, he'd make me go to the hospital and tell them I did it to myself. I didn't want that. I didn't want anyone to know. So I said, "Okay." I took the scissors. I went to my room. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I held the scissors in my hand. I thought about the baby. I thought about how small it was. I thought about how I didn't want it to die. I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill my own child with scissors. I put them back on the dresser. I walked out of the house. It was raining. Hard. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have shoes. I just wore my socks and walked. I walked 2 miles to the county clinic. I didn't know how to get there. I just followed the road. My feet were wet and cold. My shirt was soaked. When I got there, I didn't tell the nurse my name. I just said I needed help. She took me in. I sat in the waiting room with other women. Some were crying. Some were quiet like me. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't look at their faces. The doctor came in. He asked me questions. I answered with one-word replies. Yes, no, okay. He said I was 5 months along. I nodded. He said the procedure would be done that day. I said, okay. They gave me a gown. I changed in a small room. I laid on the table. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling. I felt the cold metal. I felt the pressure. I felt something inside me leave. When it was over, they wrapped me in a blanket. I didn't ask for painkillers. I didn't ask for a drink. I just walked out into the rain. I walked home again. The rain was still falling. My socks were still wet. My hair stuck to my face. I didn't go to my room. I went straight to the kitchen. My dad was still at the table. He was watching TV. He didn't turn it off. He didn't look at me. I just said, the baby was stillborn. He nodded. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask how. He didn't say anything. He just kept watching the TV. I went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the floor. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat there, holding my knees. I thought about the baby. I thought about her face. I thought about how she was real. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I whispered her name. Anna. I whispered it over and over. Anna, Anna, Anna. I didn't tell anyone. Not my teacher. Not my friend. Not the nurse. Not even Tommy when I saw him at school. I just kept quiet. I wore long sleeves all summer. I didn't go to the beach. I didn't wear shorts. I didn't let anyone see my stomach. I didn't let anyone know I had ever been pregnant. I didn't let anyone know I had ever had a daughter. I buried her in my head. I didn't go to a funeral. I didn't get a tombstone. I didn't light a candle. I didn't say a prayer. I just kept her name inside me. I carried her with me every day. When I walked to school, I whispered her name. When I washed my face, I whispered it. When I ate dinner, I whispered it. When I lay down at night, I whispered it. I didn't want to forget her. I didn't want to pretend she never existed. I didn't want to be the girl who lost a baby and acted like it never happened. I wanted to remember her. I wanted to know she was real. I didn't have a photo. I didn't have a blanket. I didn't have a name tag. But I had her name, Anna. I whispered it when I was alone. I whispered it when I was scared. I whispered it when I was angry. I whispered it when I was tired. I whispered it when I was happy. I whispered it when I thought no one was listening. I whispered it because I didn't want her to be forgotten. I didn't want her to be erased. I didn't want her to be a secret I had to hide. I wanted her to be mine, even if no one else knew, even if no one else remembered. I remembered. And I still do. I never told anyone her name. Not my mother, because she was gone. Not my father, because he didn't care. Not Tommy, because he didn't deserve to know. Not the nurse, because she didn't ask. Not the doctor, because he didn't listen. I kept it to myself. I wrote it once on a piece of paper and burned it. I didn't want anyone to find it. I didn't want anyone to know I had a daughter. I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak. I just wanted to be left alone. But I never forgot her. Not for a second. Even now, at 67, when the wind blows just right through the trees outside my window, I still whisper her name. Anna. I whisper it so softly, I can barely hear it myself. But I hear it. And I know she's still there. Not in the wind, not in the leaves, but in me. She's still with me, and I'm still with her. I never told anyone. I never will, but I still whisper it. Anna, Anna, Anna. I married Harold when I was 21 because he asked me to marry him and didn't ask any questions. He never asked where I came from. He never asked why I didn't talk about my family. He never asked why I flinched when he raised his hand to hug me too fast. He just said, "You're quiet, but you're good. I want you to be my wife." That was enough. I didn't love him like you love someone in a movie. I didn't feel butterflies, but I felt safe. He worked at the steel mill. He came home every night at 6, covered in gray dust, smelling like oil and sweat. He ate his dinner in silence. He watched the news. He went to bed early. He never yelled. He never hit me. He never touched me after we kissed goodnight. That was the kind of man he was. I thought that was love. I thought being left alone was better than being hurt. I told myself I was lucky. I had a roof, I had food, I had a man who didn't make me cry. We lived in a small house on the edge of town, near the railroad tracks. The walls were thin. I could hear the trains at night. I liked that sound. It meant something was moving, somewhere else. Harold fixed the leaky faucet. He painted the porch every summer. He bought me a toaster for Christmas. I baked pies. I made apple pie every Sunday. I used my mother's recipe, the one she wrote on a napkin before she left. I didn't tell Harold where I got it. I didn't tell him I didn't have a mother anymore. I mended socks. I washed clothes by hand in the sink when the washer broke. I smiled at church picnics. I brought potato salad and said, "It's my special recipe." I never said it was the same one I made for my father before he hit me. I let people think I was normal. I let Harold think I was happy. I didn't cry in front of him. I didn't scream. I didn't tell him about the nightmares. I didn't tell him about Lillian. I didn't tell him about the baby. I didn't tell him anything. I just did what he wanted. I was quiet. He was quiet. We were quiet together. For 10 years, I lived like that. I woke up at 5, made coffee, packed his lunch, kissed his cheek, and said, "Have a good day." I went to work at the library, shelving books. I came home, made dinner, washed the dishes, folded his shirts, and went to bed. I didn't have friends. I didn't go out. I didn't have hobbies. I read. I read every book I could find. I read about places I'd never seen. I read about women who left their husbands. I read about women who started over. I didn't think I could do that, but I liked reading about them. I liked imagining what it felt like to be free. I kept a notebook under my mattress. I wrote down the names of towns I wanted to visit. I wrote down the names of colors I wanted to wear. I wrote down the names of things I wanted to say. I never said them. I never wrote them down in front of Harold. I kept them hidden. I kept everything hidden. Then one winter, Harold got sick. It happened fast. One day he came home coughing. The next day he couldn't lift his arms. The doctor said it was cancer. Lung cancer. He smoked since he was 16. He never told me he was sick. He didn't tell me until the day the doctor said it. He looked at me and said, "I'm tired." He didn't say, "I'm scared." He didn't say, "Help me." He just said, "I'm tired." I didn't argue. I didn't beg him to get chemo. I didn't cry. I made him soup. I sat with him in the dark. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't kiss his forehead. I just sat there. He slept most of the time. I watched him breathe. I watched his skin get thin. I watched his eyes get dull. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt lighter, like a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years had been taken off. I didn't love him, but I didn't hate him either. He was just there. And now he was leaving, and I was still here. When he died, it was quiet, just like everything else. He passed in the night. I found him in the morning. His mouth was open, his hand was on the blanket. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just stood there for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. I poured it into his favorite mug. I carried it to the bedroom. I set it on the nightstand. I lit a candle, a white candle. I put it on the windowsill, right where the morning sun hit. I didn't cry. I didn't say a prayer. I didn't call the church. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the candle. I thought about how he never asked me anything. I thought about how I never asked him anything. I thought about how we both lived in silence. I thought about how I was finally alone. And I thought, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I started packing that same day. I didn't wait. I didn't give myself time to grieve. I didn't need to. I wasn't grieving him. I was grieving the life I'd lived. I took out the boxes from the attic. I packed my clothes. I packed the books I'd read. I packed the notebook with the names of towns. I packed the pie tin my mother gave me. I didn't take the dishes. I didn't take the furniture. I didn't take the curtains. I took only what I carried in my head. I took what I needed to start over. I sold the house. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't tell Harold's sister. I didn't tell the neighbors. I didn't say goodbye. I just packed. I left the candle on the windowsill. I left the coffee mug on the counter. I left the bed empty. I left the silence behind. I walked out the front door with 2 suitcases and a bus ticket. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I just kept walking. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from pain. I was running toward something I hadn't even named yet. I moved to the city with 2 suitcases and $12,000 in cash I got from selling Harold's truck. That was all I had. I didn't take any furniture. I didn't take my wedding photo. I didn't take the quilt my mother made. I took my clothes, my toothbrush, my old shoes, and the blue tin box with my mother's notebook inside. I rented a room in a building near the bus station. It was small, with a bed, a sink, and a window that faced a brick wall. The landlord didn't ask for references. He just took the money and gave me a key. I didn't tell him my real name. I said, Mrs. H. He nodded like it didn't matter. I liked that. I didn't want to be Emily Harrison anymore. I didn't want to be the widow. I didn't want to be the quiet woman who let people walk all over her. I just wanted to be Mrs. H. No history, no past, no expectations. I got a job cleaning at Lincoln Elementary School. They needed someone for the night shift. I didn't ask for the job. I showed up at the office with my suitcases and asked if they had any work. The principal looked me up and down. She didn't ask where I came from. She didn't ask why I was alone. She just said, "We pay $12 an hour. You start tomorrow at 8 p.m. I said yes. I worked every night. I emptied trash cans. I wiped down desks. I swept the hallways. I cleaned the bathrooms until my hands cracked from the bleach. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't smile at the teachers. I didn't say good morning to the custodians. I didn't answer when people asked me my name. I just did my job and went back to my room. I didn't open any of the letters my father sent. I didn't call my daughters. I didn't go to church. I didn't watch TV. I sat in the dark and listened to the city noises outside. Cars honking, sirens, people shouting. It was loud, but it didn't feel like it was trying to reach me. That's what I wanted. Noise that didn't care about me. I started noticing the kids, not the loud ones, not the ones who raised their hands or laughed too loud. I noticed the quiet ones. The girl who always wore the same blue coat, even in June. The boy who never had a lunchbox. He would sit at his desk and stare at the other kids eating. I saw him look at the crumbs on their trays. I saw the way he flinched when the teacher raised her voice. I saw the girl who always had her head down, even when the teacher called her name. She never answered. She never looked up. I didn't know their names. I didn't know their stories. But I knew what it felt like to be invisible. I knew what it felt like to be afraid to speak. I knew what it felt like to be told you were too old, too quiet, too broken to matter. I started leaving cookies in their lockers. Not fancy ones. Just the cheap kind from the grocery store. Oatmeal raisin, chocolate chip. I'd open the locker, slip in 2 cookies, and close it. I didn't leave a note. I didn't sign my name. I didn't want them to know who it was. I just wanted them to have something sweet. something that wasn't sad, something that didn't come with a question. I didn't think about it as teaching. I thought I was just being kind. But one night, after I finished cleaning the third-grade classroom, I found a piece of paper stuck to the bottom of a desk. It was drawn in crayon. A stick figure with a big smile. Below it, in shaky letters, it said, "Mrs. H, you are nice." I held it for a long time. I didn't cry. I just folded it and put it in my pocket. The next night, I left 3 cookies in that same locker. The next week, another drawing. A house, a tree, a woman with long hair holding a hand. It didn't say anything, but I knew. I started leaving more cookies. I started leaving small notebooks too. Not big ones, just little ones with blank pages. I put them in lockers with a pencil. I didn't tell them to write. I didn't say anything, but I saw them start to write. One boy wrote, "I don't like it when my dad yells." A girl wrote, "I wish my mom would come to school." I didn't read every note. I read enough. I saw their words. I saw their pain. And I realized something. I had been silent for so long, I forgot how to speak. But these kids? They were speaking without saying a word, and I was learning how to listen. I started staying after my shift, not to clean, just to sit. I'd sit in the empty classroom after the kids left. I'd open a book, not a novel, not a magazine. I'd open a first-grade reading book. I'd read aloud to no one. I'd sound out the words slowly. The cat sat on the mat. I'd say it again. The cat sat on the mat. I'd say it louder. I'd say it with feeling. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just knew I needed to hear my own voice. I didn't have anyone to talk to, but I had these books, and the words were safe. They didn't judge me. They didn't ask where I came from. They didn't care if I was old or poor or broken. They just were. I started reading to the kids when they came in early. I didn't say anything. I'd just sit in the corner with a book. One day, a girl sat down next to me. She didn't say hello. She just opened her own book and started reading. I kept reading mine. After 10 minutes, she looked up. "Can you help me with this word?" she asked. I showed her. "It's jump," I said. She smiled. That was the first time I spoke to a child in 3 years. I didn't feel scared. I felt like I was finally breathing. I didn't tell anyone I used to be a teacher. I didn't tell anyone I had taught 800 kids to read. I didn't tell anyone I had spent 42 years in a classroom. I didn't want to be Emily Harrison, the teacher. I wanted to be Mrs. H, the woman who left cookies. But one day, a boy came up to me after I cleaned the library. He was small. He had a cast on his arm. He looked at me and said, "You're the one who leaves the cookies, right?" I didn't answer. I just kept wiping the shelf. He didn't move. "I like the chocolate chip ones," he said. "They're soft." I looked at him. His eyes were wide, not scared, not quiet, just honest. "They're my favorite too," I said. He smiled. "My mom used to make them. She's gone now." I didn't say anything. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. I just nodded. And I left him 3 cookies the next day. That night, I went home and opened my mother's notebook. I read her words again. Kindness is not weakness. I wrote something new in the margins. Sometimes, speaking is just listening long enough to hear someone else's silence. I still wear the same uniform. I still say Mrs. H when someone asks my name. But now, when I walk through the halls, kids wave at me. Some of them leave little notes in my locker. "Thank you for the cookies. I read the book you left. I finished it. My dad yelled again last night. I cried. But I ate the cookie. I don't answer them. I don't write back, but I keep every one. I keep them in a shoebox under my bed. I don't read them every day. I only read them when I feel like I'm forgetting who I am, when I feel like I'm slipping back into silence, when I feel like I'm becoming invisible again. Then I open the box, and I read, and I remember. I didn't become a teacher again. I didn't go back to the classroom, but I learned to speak, not with a voice, not with a title, but with cookies, with books, with silence that wasn't empty anymore. I didn't fix their lives. I didn't save them. I just let them know they weren't alone. And in doing that, I finally learned how to speak again. I didn't know it then, but that's what I was doing. I was learning to speak, And now, when I say Mrs. H, I'm not hiding. I'm choosing. I never planned to be a teacher. I didn't go to college to become one. I didn't dream about chalkboards or report cards. I just needed a job after Harold died. The school district had openings for aides, so I applied. I thought I'd clean desks, hand out papers, maybe help with lunch. But the first day, the third grade teacher got sick, and they asked me to fill in. I didn't know what to do. I stood in front of 28 kids, all of them staring at me like I was supposed to have all the answers. My hands shook. I opened the book. I read a story about a boy who lost his dog. I didn't know how to make it better. I just read it slow, like I was reading to myself. After class, a little boy named Marcus came up to me. He had a red shirt with a hole in the elbow. His shoes were too big. He didn't say anything. He just held out a piece of paper. It was drawn in crayon. A woman with wings, big wings. She was standing in front of a house with a fence. The woman had a big smile. Below it, in messy letters, it said, "You look like my mom." I didn't tell him his mom was gone. I didn't tell him I didn't have wings. I didn't say anything. I just took the drawing. I folded it carefully. I put it in my purse. That night, I pinned it to the wall above my bed. I looked at it every night before I turned off the light. I didn't cry. I just stared. And I thought, maybe I can be someone's mom for a little while. I started staying after school. Not because I was told to, not because I was paid extra. I just stayed. I sat at the back of the classroom while the other kids left. I pulled up a chair next to the ones who didn't raise their hands. There was Maria, who never spoke. She'd sit with her head down, her hair covering her face. She wore the same dress every day. One day, I handed her a book about a girl who didn't talk either. I didn't say anything. I just sat beside her. She turned the pages. I turned the pages. After 10 minutes, she whispered, "She's scared." I nodded. "Me too," I said. She looked up, just for a second. Then she went back to the book. That was the first time she spoke to me. I didn't push. I didn't ask why she was quiet. I just let her be. I learned their names, not just the ones who shouted out answers. I learned the names of the ones who sat in the back. Jamal, who came to school without breakfast. I started keeping granola bars in my desk. I gave him one every morning. I didn't say, "Here, eat this." I just slid it across the desk like it was nothing. He never said thank you, but he started showing up earlier. I learned about Lila, whose dad was in jail. She drew pictures of him with a big smile, even though he hadn't been home in 2 years. I kept those drawings too. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. I just knew. I learned that silence wasn't always fear. Sometimes it was how they stayed alive. They didn't talk, because if they did, someone might ask why their shoes were torn, why their coat didn't fit, why they didn't have a birthday party. I didn't fix their lives. I just let them know I saw them. I got my teaching certificate when I was 42. I studied at night after cleaning the school. I used my pension money to pay for the classes. I didn't tell anyone, not my neighbors, not my friends, not even my daughters. I didn't say, "I'm going to school." I just said, "I have some errands." I didn't tell them I was divorced. I didn't tell them I had a baby who died. I didn't tell them I once held scissors in my own hands and thought about using them. I didn't tell them I had been called a mistake. I didn't tell them I had been invisible. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me. I didn't want them to think I was broken. I just wanted to be the teacher, the one who showed up, the one who didn't ask questions, the one who didn't judge. I wore my best clothes to class. I combed my hair. I smiled. I didn't smile because I was happy. I smiled because I knew what it felt like to be ignored. I didn't want my kids to feel that way. I wrote their names on index cards. I wrote down what they liked, what scared them, what made them laugh. I remembered. I remembered Jamal's favorite color was blue. I remembered Maria's little brother had a fever last week. I remembered Lila drew a cat with no eyes because she said the cat was blind like her grandma. I didn't tell anyone I remembered. I just acted like it was normal, because it was. I never said, "I'm your teacher." I didn't wear a name tag. I didn't stand at the front like a boss. I sat on the floor with them. I read books out loud. I let them choose the stories. I let them talk. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct their grammar. I didn't make them feel small for not knowing. I just listened. I learned that the kids who didn't talk were the ones who had the most to say. They just didn't have anyone to say it to. So I became that person. I didn't have a big speech. I didn't have a plan. I just said it, every day, to every kid who sat in front of me. You are not a mistake. I said it to Marcus, the boy with the wings. I said it to Maria when she finally raised her hand to answer a question. I said it to Jamal when he brought me a rock he found on the playground. This is for you, he said. It's pretty. I kept it on my desk. I said it to Lila when she cried because her dad didn't call. I said it to the boy who was bullied because he talked funny. I said it to the girl who wore the same shoes for 3 months. I didn't say it like a prayer. I said it like a fact. Like the sun comes up. Like water is wet. Like you are here, and that matters. I didn't say it to make them feel better. I said it because I needed them to believe it. And I needed them to know I believed it too. I didn't tell anyone about my past because I didn't want them to see me as broken. I didn't want them to think I was the kind of teacher who needed pity. I didn't want them to wonder if I was crazy, if I was dangerous, if I was the kind of woman who could hold scissors and not cry. I didn't want them to know I had a dead child. I didn't want them to know I had been called a mistake. I didn't want them to know I had been silent for so long. I didn't want them to think I was weak. I wanted them to think I was strong, not because I had never been hurt, but because I had been hurt and still showed up every day with a book, with a granola bar, with a smile, with the same 3 words, you are not a mistake. I didn't tell them I had been invisible. I just made sure they weren't. I didn't tell them I had been alone. I just sat beside them. I didn't tell them I had been afraid. I just stayed. I didn't tell them I had lost everything. I just gave them something they could hold on to. A drawing, a rock, a word, a quiet moment. I didn't need them to know my story. I just needed them to know theirs mattered. I didn't plan to be a teacher, but I became one, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because somewhere along the way, I realized I had been teaching all my life. I had been teaching my daughter, Anna, how to be brave, even when I didn't know how. I had been teaching Lillian, even when she was gone. I had been teaching myself, every day, to breathe after the silence. I didn't get a medal. I didn't get a plaque. I didn't get a party when I got my certificate. I just put it in my drawer. I kept teaching. I kept listening. I kept saying those words. You are not a mistake. I said it to the girl who was afraid to go home. I said it to the boy who didn't have a coat. I said it to the one who didn't have a mother. I said it to the one who didn't have a father. I said it to the ones who didn't have a voice. I said it to the ones who didn't think they mattered. And every time I said it, I believed it a little more. Not just for them, for me too, because I was still here, and I was still enough. I didn't need to tell them my story. I just needed to show them that they didn't need to hide theirs, and that was enough. He showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering the geraniums on the back porch when I saw him standing at the front gate. He wasn't walking like a man anymore. He was shuffling, like his legs didn't want to carry him. His coat was too big, hanging off his shoulders like it belonged to someone else. His face was thin, skin stretched tight over his bones, and his hands were shaking. He smelled like old whiskey and sweat, the same smell I remembered from when I was a kid and he came home late. He didn't knock. He just stood there, holding a piece of paper in his hand. It was the letter I wrote him 10 years ago. I had mailed it from my apartment in the city after Harold died. I asked him if he remembered me. I asked if he still thought I was a mistake. I never heard back. I never expected to. Now he was holding it like it was something holy. I didn't go to the door. I kept watering the plants. I waited. He didn't call out. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at the house like he was afraid to step on the porch. After 5 minutes, I walked around to the front. I opened the screen door. He didn't move. You came, I said. He nodded. I'm dying, he said. His voice was weak, like it was worn out from years of not being used. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just held out the letter. I kept it, he said. All these years. I carried it in my coat pocket. I looked at it. The envelope was faded. The stamp was torn. The address was smudged. I didn't take it. I turned and walked back inside. I went to the closet in my bedroom. I opened the bottom shelf. I pulled out a shoebox. It was old cardboard with a broken latch. I opened it. Inside were 32 letters, all written by me, all addressed to him, all never sent. I picked them all up. I carried them back to the front porch. I put the box down on the step. "Here," I said. "I kept them, so you'd know I was still here." He looked at the box like he didn't understand what it was. Then he looked at me. His eyes filled up. He didn't try to wipe them. He just let them roll down his cheeks. Real tears. Not the kind you fake when you want sympathy. The kind that come when you know you've lost something you can't get back. He sat down on the porch step. I didn't sit with him. I stayed standing. He didn't ask for a drink. He didn't ask about my life. He just sat there, staring at the box like it was the only thing left in the world. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell him I was happy. I didn't tell him I was lonely. I didn't tell him I missed him. I didn't tell him I hated him. I just stood there. He stayed for an hour. He didn't move much. He just breathed. Sometimes he would lift his hand like he was going to touch the box, then he would drop it again. He didn't open any of the letters. He didn't read them. He didn't ask me why I wrote them. He didn't ask why I never sent them. He just sat there, silent, with his head bowed, like he was waiting for something to happen. Maybe he was waiting for me to forgive him. Maybe he was waiting for me to say his name. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just watched him. The sun moved across the sky. A bird landed on the fence. A car drove by. He didn't react to any of it. He was just there, and I was just there, and we were both still alive. When he stood up, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say he was sorry. He just picked up the box. He held it like it was heavy. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were red. His nose was running. He didn't wipe it. He just turned and walked down the path. He didn't look back. I watched him go. He didn't look right or left. He just kept walking, slow, like each step hurt. He didn't wave. He didn't turn around. He just disappeared around the corner. I waited until I couldn't see him anymore. Then I went back inside. I got the key to the fireplace. I got the matches. I went to the backyard. I found the old metal trash can where I burned leaves in the fall. I took the box from my coat pocket. I opened it. I pulled out the first letter. I read the first line. "Dad, I don't know if you remember me." I held the paper over the can. I lit it. The flame caught fast. I watched it burn. I watched the ink turn black. I watched the paper curl and turn to ash. I burned every letter, one by one. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt quiet, like a door had closed, like a weight had been lifted. I didn't burn it because I was mad. I burned it because I was done. I didn't need those words anymore. I didn't need to prove I was there. I was here, and I was fine. I went back inside. I washed my hands. I made tea. I sat in my chair by the window. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there. The house was quiet, too quiet. But it was my quiet. Not the quiet of fear, not the quiet of waiting, not the quiet of being ignored. This was the quiet of peace. I thought about the letters. I thought about the man who wrote them. I thought about the little girl who wrote them. I thought about the woman I became. I thought about the years I spent waiting for him to say something, to say he was sorry, to say he loved me, to say I wasn't a mistake. He never said it, and now he never would. But I didn't need him to say it. I didn't need his words. I had my own. I had my life. I had my house. I had my peace. I didn't need him to come back. I didn't need him to be sorry. I didn't need him to know I was still here. I already knew, and that was enough. That night, I dreamed about him. Not the man he was when he came to my door, not the drunk, broken man with the whiskey smell. I dreamed about him as he was when I was 8. He was standing in the kitchen, wearing his work shirt, sleeves rolled up. He was making pancakes. He was humming. He had flour on his nose. He turned and smiled at me. "Come here, kiddo," he said. "I made your favorite." I ran to him. I hugged his legs. I felt his shirt against my cheek. I smelled the pancakes. I smelled him. I woke up with tears on my face, not because I missed him, not because I wanted him back, but because I remembered what it felt like to believe he could be good. I wiped my face. I got up. I went to the window. I looked out at the dark yard. The stars were out. The wind was quiet. I didn't cry again. I just stood there. And I knew for the first time that I was free, not because he was gone, but because I stopped waiting for him to be the man I needed him to be. I was the woman I needed to be, and that was enough. The next morning, I made pancakes. I didn't eat them. I put them on a plate and left them on the back porch. I didn't know why. Maybe I was leaving them for him. Maybe I was leaving them for the little girl I used to be. Maybe I was just leaving them because I could. I went inside. I closed the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had burned the letters. I had seen him. I had let him sit on my porch. I had given him the truth. And now I was done. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't love him anymore. I didn't care about him anymore. He was just a man who had been part of my past, and the past was behind me. I turned on the radio. I put on my favorite song. I started cleaning the kitchen. I scrubbed the counters. I wiped the windows. I folded the towels. I didn't think about him. I didn't think about the letters. I didn't think about the past. I just did the work. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt full. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I was finally, truly, at peace. I never told my students about the baby. Not once in all those years. Not when they asked why I always had extra cookies in my desk. Not when they saw me staring at the clock at 3:17 p.m. every day, the same time I held her. Not even when a little boy cried because his dog died and I held him until he stopped shaking. I kept it locked inside me like a secret I was too scared to name. I thought if I didn't talk about it, it wouldn't be real. If I didn't say it out loud, maybe I could pretend I never lost her. I just taught. I graded papers. I helped kids read. I smiled when they got it right. I stayed quiet when they got it wrong. I never told anyone I had a daughter named Anna. I never told anyone I had held her. I never told anyone I had whispered her name into the cold hospital air before they took her away. Then came Rosa. She was in my 4th grade class. She never raised her hand. She never smiled. She sat in the back corner, always with her hoodie pulled up, even in 90-degree heat. Her clothes were always too big, always dirty. She didn't talk to anyone, not the other kids, not the lunch lady, not even the school counselor who tried 3 times to talk to her alone. I watched her. I noticed how she flinched when someone raised their voice. I noticed how she never looked anyone in the eye. I started leaving a granola bar in her locker every Monday. I didn't sign it. I didn't say anything. One day, she left a drawing on my desk, a stick figure with 2 dots for eyes. Underneath, in shaky pencil, I wish I was pretty. I didn't say anything. I just put the drawing in my purse. The next week, she didn't come to school. I called her house. Her dad answered. "She's fine," he said. "She's just quiet." I didn't press. I waited. Then, one afternoon, after school, she came to my office. She didn't knock. She just stood in the doorway, head down, hands twisted together. I didn't ask her to sit. I didn't ask what was wrong. I just closed my door. I pulled out a chair. I sat down. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Finally, she whispered, "My dad says I'm ugly." That's all. Just those 3 words. I didn't say, "That's not true." I didn't say, "He's wrong." I didn't say, "You're beautiful." I just reached out. I took her hand. Her skin was cold. Her fingers were trembling. I looked at her. I looked right into her eyes. And I said, "I had a daughter once. I held her for 3 minutes. I named her Hope." I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I just said it, like I was telling her the time of day. She stared at me. Her eyes got wide. Her mouth opened. Then her whole face changed, like someone had turned on a light inside her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked at me like I had given her the sky, like she had been living in a dark room and I had opened the window. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. Then she stood up. She walked out. She didn't look back, but the next day she sat in the front row, and she didn't pull her hoodie up. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't make tea. I just went to my bedroom. I opened my closet. I moved the winter coats. I pulled out the blue tin box. It was dusty. The latch was rusted. I hadn't opened it since I buried the baby's sock. I sat on the floor. I opened it. The smell of old paper hit me. I took out the first thing, a photo of my father. He was holding me when I was 2. I was smiling. He was smiling. I didn't know then that he would become the man who made me afraid. I put it down. I took out the sock, the tiny white sock, the one they gave me before they took her. I held it in my hand. It was so small, I could cover it with my thumb. I remembered the weight of her, the warmth, the way her fingers curled around mine. I put it back. I took out the pressed flower. It was purple. Lillian had put it in her hair the day we made our promise to run away. I remembered her bare feet in the dirt. I remembered how she laughed. I put it down. I took out the notebook. My mother's notebook. I opened it. Her handwriting was still clear. Kindness is not weakness. I read it. I read it again. I read it a third time. Then I closed the book. I took out a piece of paper. I took a pen. I didn't write to anyone. I didn't write to my father. I didn't write to Daniel. I didn't write to Sarah. I wrote to me. I wrote to the girl who survived, the girl who held the scissors, the girl who buried her baby, the girl who never told anyone, the girl who learned to be quiet, the girl who still whispered a name in the dark. I wrote, "You survived." I wrote, "You are still here." I wrote, "Now it's time to remember, not to punish yourself, but to honor the girl who made it." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, holding the paper until the sun came up. I didn't tell Rosa about the sock. I didn't tell her about the flower. I didn't tell her about the letter I wrote. I didn't tell her about the blue box. I didn't need to. She didn't need to know all the details. She just needed to know she wasn't alone, that someone else had been told she wasn't enough, that someone else had been told she didn't matter, and that someone else had lived. That was enough. The next day, she brought me a drawing. Not a stick figure this time. A girl with long hair. The girl was standing in front of a house with a garden. There were flowers. There was a swing. And the girl was smiling. Underneath, she wrote, "Hope." I didn't say anything. I just put the drawing on my desk. I looked at it every day. I didn't cry when I saw it. I just smiled. A small smile. But it was real. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying something heavy. I felt like I was finally holding something light. I started keeping the blue box on my nightstand, not hidden, not locked, just there, on the wooden table, next to my lamp. I didn't open it every day, but I looked at it, every morning, every night. I didn't think about the pain anymore. I thought about the girl who got up, the girl who went to work, the girl who taught 800 children to read, the girl who left cookies in lockers, the girl who held a baby for 3 minutes and named her Hope, the girl who kept writing letters to herself, even when no one else was listening. I didn't need to forget. I didn't need to pretend it never happened. I just needed to remember who I was, not the woman who was hurt, not the woman who was silent, not the woman who was afraid. I was the woman who survived, and I was still here. That was enough. That was everything. I didn't tell anyone else about Anna, not Rosa, not my daughters, not David, not even Linda. I didn't need to. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their comfort. I just needed to know that I hadn't erased her, that I hadn't buried her so deep that I forgot she existed. I kept her name in my heart. I whispered it sometimes, when I was alone. Anna, Anna, Anna. I didn't cry when I said it. I didn't feel sad. I felt proud. I had carried her with me. I had held her. I had named her. And I had lived. I didn't need to be brave. I just needed to be honest, with myself, with the girl in the mirror, with the woman who had survived everything. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a broken woman anymore. I saw a woman who had lost everything and still found a way to speak, to teach, to love, to survive. I didn't need to tell the world. I just needed to know it was true. And it was. I had survived. And I was still here. I still have the blue box. It sits on my nightstand. I open it sometimes. I look at the photos. I hold the sock. I smell the flower. I read the letter I wrote. I don't cry. I don't shake. I just sit there, quiet, calm. I don't feel the pain like I used to. I feel the presence. I feel her, Anna. I feel the girl who held her. I feel the woman who didn't give up. I feel the teacher who taught children to read. I feel the mother who never stopped loving. I feel the woman who finally remembered, I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. And I chose to live, not just survive, not just hide, but live, fully, honestly, quietly. And I am still here. That's all I needed to know. That's all I needed to say. I am 67 years old today. I woke up this morning to the sun coming through the kitchen window, just like it did when Michael was alive. The light hits the counter just right, and you can see the dust dancing in the air. I made my coffee the old way, in the pot, not one of those machines Sarah bought. I poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that Michael fixed with superglue. I sat at the table and looked around. The house is full of light, not because I painted the walls white or put up new curtains, because I took back what was mine. The terracotta curtains are back on the windows. The dining table has my mother's lace runner again. The bookshelf holds Michael's novels, the ones Sarah packed away. The pictures of our trips to the wine country are back on the wall. I didn't throw anything out. I just moved it back where it belonged. My students' letters are taped to the fridge. Not all of them. Just the ones that say, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I read them every morning before I leave the house. They remind me why I kept going. My cat, Michael, is curled up on the windowsill. He's orange, like the setting sun. He came to my garden one afternoon, skinny and scared. I left out food. He stayed. I didn't ask him to. He just did. He sleeps there every day, same spot, same way, just like Harold used to. Harold would sit in that same chair after dinner, reading the paper, feet up on the ottoman. He never talked much. He just was. I didn't miss him when he died. I missed the quiet. Now I miss the quiet again, but in a different way. Now it's peaceful, not empty. Michael the cat stretches and yawns, and I smile. I don't think about Sarah anymore. I don't think about Daniel's silence. I don't think about the money. I don't think about the lock. I don't think about the letter I wrote or the video I recorded. I don't think about any of it unless I need to. And I don't need to anymore. I don't hate them. I don't hate my father. I don't hate the preacher's son. I don't even hate the woman who told me I was too old to live in my own house. I just don't let them live in my house anymore. That's all. I didn't need to hate them to be free. I just needed to stop letting them take space. I speak now, not because I want people to feel sorry for me, not because I want to be called brave, not because I want a standing ovation. I speak because I know there are women out there right now, sitting in their kitchens, staring at a lock on a pantry door. They're pretending it's not happening. They're telling themselves it's just a misunderstanding. They're saying, maybe if I'm quiet, it will stop. I want them to know it won't stop. Not unless you make it stop. I spent 30 years believing that silence was safety, that if I didn't fight back, if I didn't yell, if I didn't cry, if I didn't make a scene, then I would be safe. But safety isn't hiding. Safety isn't letting someone else decide where you sit, what you eat, how you live. Safety is standing up, even when your knees shake, even when your voice cracks, even when your own son looks at you like you're a problem. Even when your daughter-in-law smiles and says, "You're so lucky we're here for you," even when the whole world tells you to be quiet. I stood up. I didn't do it with a scream. I did it with a letter, with a recording, with a bank statement, with a notary, with a quiet no. That's how I stood up. I didn't get my life back. I built it, one word at a time. I built it when I wrote my first letter to David Fields. I built it when I opened the blue tin box and saw my name on the deed. I built it when I played that recording in front of my children and watched Sarah turn white. I built it when I told Daniel I wouldn't be his mother if he didn't respect me. I built it when I bought the green notebook and wrote down every dollar I spent. I built it when I said yes to Linda's coffee, even though I hadn't left the house alone in 2 years. I built it when I let my grandkids hug me without asking if it was okay. I built it when I stopped apologizing for existing. I built it when I fed the stray cat and didn't wonder if he'd leave. I built it with every cup of coffee I made for myself, every time I sat in my garden without checking if someone else wanted to join me. I built it with every breath I took that wasn't held in fear. I didn't get my old life back. I made a new one, and it's better. I don't need to be fixed. I don't need to be saved. I don't need to be forgiven by the people who hurt me. I just need to live, and I am living. I wake up and I choose what to wear. I choose what to eat. I choose who comes into my house. I choose when to laugh. I choose when to be quiet. I choose to keep the letters from my students. I choose to keep the cat. I choose to water my plants every morning. I choose to call my daughters on Sundays. I choose to say no to Daniel when he asks to come over too soon. I choose to say yes when I'm ready. No one else gets to choose for me. Not anymore. I used to think I had to be grateful for what little they gave me. Now I know I had every right to everything. My house, my money, my peace, my dignity. I didn't lose them. I just forgot I had them. And now I remember. If you're listening, you can too. You don't have to be 67. You don't have to be a teacher. You don't have to have a lawyer named David Fields. You don't have to have a blue tin box. You just have to be tired. Tired of smiling when you want to scream. Tired of pretending you're fine. Tired of being told you're too old, too quiet, too much, too little. Tired of living in your own home like a guest. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be done. Done pretending. Done waiting. Done being silent. You don't have to do it all at once. Just one thing today. Write down one thing they took from you. Find one piece of paper that proves it's yours. Call one person you trust. Say one word out loud. No. That's enough. That's where it starts. I started with a lock on a pantry door. You might start with a voice that won't stop shaking. That's okay. It still counts. I didn't get my life back. I built it. One word, one child, one breath, one choice. And you can too. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not alone. You are still here. And that's enough. More than enough. Did you feel this story in your bones? And where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your voice. If this resonated with you, please send a super thanks so I can keep telling stories like this one. Stories that give voice to those who were made to stay silent. Thank you for being here, for listening, for not turning away. On the screen, you'll see 2 more stories that changed lives just like this one. Stories of women who reclaimed their homes, their dignity, their truth. There are hundreds more waiting on this channel. Each one real, each one raw. Don't walk away without subscribing, because if you've ever been made to feel small in your own home, you belong here. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.